Hello, welcome to part one of this three-part series. My name is Anna Ray. I'm the owner and speech therapist at Connection for Speech and Language Therapy in Houston and also Bel Air and Pearland. And today is just, like I said, the first part of this series, identifying red flags and green flags for your children ages 0 to 3. We talk a lot about milestones. I have found in my work with parents, I've done 4 years of home health, that what even does that mean? What really should you be looking for? How can you really identify that there's an issue with your kid? A reason to refer to a speech therapist or other professional, although in this case it's just speech therapy. And then what are all the green flags that they're doing? What can you do about it? Again, in this presentation, I'll talk a little bit about strategies and a lot about just when to refer. And then really, how can we help our kids talk no matter what? Parents always want me to help their kids talk. Of course, I do that as a speech therapist, but I really want to emphasize that talking, the way I am talking to you right now, is not the only way to communicate. It's not even the best way to communicate. It is one piece of communication. And you see, I'm using my hands, I am using words on a screen, I'm using video. We all are communicating all the time. Talking is just one piece of it. For anybody who uses sign language, that counts as talking, or an AAC device, that counts. If you use more than one modality or system, that also counts. Let's get into it. So, milestones. Here's the thing about timelines. Timelines are great, but they're just a tool. I think my face is blocked. Yeah, okay. Well, anyway, milestones are based on typical development. There's research behind milestones, that's great, but it may not fit your child if for any reason your child is not developing typically. Atypical development is not wrong. It doesn't, I'm not using a euphemism. I'm not sugarcoating a problem. I'm just saying anything that does not follow this particular trajectory, these skills in this order at this time, is considered atypical. And what a professional like myself will do is look at, is this an atypical development that needs addressing? Is this development that would that could be supported through maybe speech therapy? Is this just how your kid develops? But timelines are a useful tool. The thing is that the skills matter more. So I'm really annoyed that my face is blocking this off. Here I will time and focus on skills. I don't even know what that word is. Okay. Skills matter more than timeline, though. That's the thing that you need to know. And the general order, there's overlap, and sometimes things aren't exactly in this order, but generally what we're looking at as professionals and what you can be looking at as a parent or caregiver is that your child is developing these particular skills. If it's not in the timeline, usually it's recommended that you talk to a professional. If they're missing skills entirely, it's usually recommended. Atypical communication, very, very, very briefly. Some kids are just on their own timelines because of family, because of environment, because of they are who they are. That happens. If your child is delayed, that's not necessarily a disorder. They may still benefit from therapy. They may not. They probably will. Most kids develop from really benefit from therapy. But a delay doesn't necessarily mean a disorder. Parents get very worried, and I'm just going to tell you, don't worry. These are just things that we can work through. Language development varies kid to kid. Absolutely. You'll see that even with your own kids, right? If you have more than one. Genetic syndromes matter. So, for example, in general, most kids with some sort of genetic syndrome, these milestones are just not going to be all that helpful. They're depending on the syndrome, but often you're not worried about the timeline, but we do consider the skills that we want to support them in developing. Neurotype also matters, as do many other factors. Neurotype, if your kid is autistic, if your kid has ADHD, if your kid has any sensory, I'm just going to use the general word, stuff. I myself have ADHD and a lot of sensory stuff. There's a lot of, I'm neurodivergent, and the vast majority of kids I work with are neurodivergent. So it doesn't mean that you will have or do have a communication disorder. And it probably means you have differences in communication. They may or may not be helped by therapy. They will almost certainly be supported by a caregiver like you watching this, learning some skills, strategies, having knowledge about communication. I said this is a 3-part series. The first part we're working on is just 0 to 12 months, the first year of life, up until their first birthday. The maid, like if I have it broken down like this because it helped me as a speech therapist. Things are very clear and simple kind of the first year of life, and then as they get older and older and these skills just grow and grow and grow and grow, it's almost like it's easy for me to lose sight of the target. What should they actually be able to do in these certain years? And so I always just like the most simple, like the most zoomed out thing is in the first year of life, we're working towards one word. At the end of their first year, we want them to be able to say a word. At the end of the second year, we're looking for them to be able to have 2-word combinations and a 50-word vocabulary. By the time they turn 3, at the end of the third year, we want them to be putting words together and expressing themselves that way. Again, your kid may not match up with these timelines, and that's okay. The progression will still be the same for most kids. This is another atypical thing. We're not getting into it today, but Gestalt language processing is one where it won't look like this. But since most kids, or like a lot of kids, develop like this, that's what this presentation is about. If you need more about Gestalt processing, meaningfulspeech.com is a great resource. So here we are in year 1. As I said, the whole first year is about getting to the first word. Kind of. Parents, like, we know words. We know when our kid is talking. That's what we're looking for. Parents who come to me, oh, I want my kid to say more. I want them to talk more. I want them to use more words. Great. I do too. If that's what you want, that's what I want. There's so much that goes into saying a word, and there's so much communication that goes on that happens that is not words. Again, I mentioned. Right now I'm using hand gestures, I'm using facial expressions, I'm using written words, I'm using video. But anyway, we'll talk about that. Kind of a word. The first year develops the foundation for communication, for all communication. They're developing motor skills to communicate. Motor skills is their movement skills, like their muscles. They're developing cognitive skills to communicate and also to do everything else, right? Cognitive is their thinking skills. So they're using their mind and muscle to understand, respond, and express. Cognitive using the mind, muscle, motor using their muscles. Okay, that's what it is. Like, they've just been born. For the first 3 months of life, they're not doing a lot. They can't do a lot. And then as time goes on, they can do a whole lot. There's a lot that happens in the first year. That for most babies results in a first word. One of the reasons this is a really important milestone is that your baby, like, hearing starts developing in the second trimester. So maybe end of first trimester. I can't remember. I think it's around 16 weeks. So when you have a hearing problem, even at birth, get that addressed. If we find it in speech therapy, before speech therapy, like, get that addressed right away, because they're way behind. And there's so much you can do for baby that you find out has a hearing problem. There's so much you can do, and that's really what I want to emphasize here is, like, it's not like, oh, there's a problem. No, there's so much. That's why interventionists like me exist. Like, get it addressed. It's okay. So in order to get to a word, it says that it depends on where we're going. I'm going to just break down real quick these 4 things: communication, speech, language, and verbal skills. I keep telling you about communication. Communication is the umbrella, right? This is like the everything: talking, signing, using emojis, texting, talking on the phone, making faces at your friend across the table so that somebody else doesn't know what you're talking about. That's all communication. How do you pass one message from, like, a message from one person to another person? You use communication. What kind of communication is there? Lots. We're talking about speech and language, which is my domain as a speech language pathologist, and verbal skills. So communication, the whole picture, everything is communication. Specifically, in order to communicate, if your child is going to be talking, They use speech. Most kids will use speech. Most bodies are made to use speech. And that means my lungs and my mouth and my muscles and my tongue and my lips and my nose, right? Like speech is spoken language. Language is just the system that you're using to communicate. The speech system of English is different than the speech system of Spanish, is different than the speech system of Arabic, blah, blah, but they're all languages, they're all using speech to communicate. So what are verbal skills? This is important because we're talking about words in this presentation. Verbal skills are word skills. A child who is highly verbal, or we say has good skills using words. When parents come to me and they want their kids to say more words, they want me to improve their verbal skills. As a speech language pathologist, I work on speech and language and communication, which includes using words. But for some kids, they use sign language for all kinds of reasons, not even just deaf and hard of hearing kids. All kinds of reasons will benefit from and find it easier to use signs. And that's those kids are verbal. A child, an adult, a human who uses an AAC device, you might see iPads or you might see any number of devices, and they're using words to send a message, words to encode into a language to communicate with you. That's verbal. When we talk about people being nonverbal, we probably mean just non-speaking. We say this a lot about the autistic community, that like, oh, they're nonverbal, or oh, he's nonverbal because he's autistic. Well, he's probably just non-speaking. Like he people tend to have verbal skills, but they may not use their mouth to express those skills. We may have other ways, and that's great. And it's okay if you don't agree with me right now that that's great and it feels scary to you. That's why professionals like me exist. Communication development. Generally, what we're looking at when I say communication development, think the sounds your baby is making, the movements they're making, the expressions. Some babies are very expressive in the face. The gestures that they use, how easy it is for them to understand you just by speaking, not even using gestures. Do they respond to their name at a certain age, right? Again, 0 to 3 months, a lot happens and nothing happens, right? There's sociability. Some kids are more social than others. Again, this in itself isn't a green flag, a red flag, but if we see communication in all these areas, sounds, movement, expressions, understanding, sociability, responses to other people, okay, great. We want to see a trajectory. We want to see that your child is developing. And then I say other skills, because of course there's so much happening in the first year of life. Language is last. Like communication, not necessarily last, but like their first word, it's like the last of these early skills to develop, because it's so complex. It's so sophisticated. It takes a lot to say a word. I'm going to go into some of these in more detail than others. So communication, again, there's understanding versus expressing, what we call receptive versus expressive. So there's kids who really understand very well, but don't talk very much. There's the motor skills. In order to talk, you have to be able to move your jaw in a very intentional way and move your tongue and move your lips. And then what we don't think about, but as SLPs we do, all the things you cannot see. So the vocal folds and the velum and just like the diaphragm for your lungs to support speaking. There's a lot happening. The cognitive skills, cognitive thinking skills, mind skills are part of language. I'll get into that more when they're older, but they have to have a message to send. They have to know that you can receive a message, and this takes cognitive development. Interest in other people, and I said or not just because I don't know, like some babies aren't interested in other people, but they can still find it useful at least to communicate or fun or rewarding in some way. But in general, we look for kids who are interested in other people. If they are not interested, and there are ways to gauge interest, it's not necessarily eye contact, right? Kids who are interested in other people tend to develop communication skills more easily than kids who are not. And of course, there are very social kids who still benefit from therapy. And then responding to others. So big picture, as a parent, it's easy to focus on words. Say this, say this, say this, but are they meeting other milestones? And if they're not, like possibly that's related to them not speaking or not communicating yet. Like they've got to master a bunch of things. I should put in a visual of a pyramid, which I don't have in here, but that would be helpful. I'm going to do that maybe in the second part. Anyway, speech is a fine motor skill. Fine motor skill. So first, we work on gross motor skills. Your baby first has to be able to like hold their head up, right? Babies are not born able to do that. They have to be able to intentionally move their limbs, because we know that newborns are just like they can't really move. As they get older, they can, and then they can roll over, and then they can sit up, and they can crawl, and they can pull to stand, and then they can stand, and then they can walk, right? Those are all big, gross motor skills. So speech is a fine motor skill. So if they don't have good control of gross motor skills, they probably don't have fine motor skills yet. Again, that's a big generalization. There's lots of overlap, blah, blah, blah. But I think there's a reason that, talking comes typically after these other milestones. Again, typically, we're talking about a majority here, that your kid probably won't talk until they walk. Not necessarily, but if we're looking at, look, I left the I out of skills. Anyway, if you're looking at a milestone chart, those things usually happen around the same time. Motor skills go from involuntary and rough, newborns, think about how they move, to gestures within the first year. There's a lot of development there. 16 by 16. So gestures are really important. I'm going to talk about them more on the next slide, but I want you to know, maybe open up a tab that's firstwordsproject.com and look at 16 by 16, with the goal being 16 gestures by 16 months. Why? And you'll notice I'm starting this presentation out talking about gestures. Gestures predict language development. There's good research behind this. So we want them working on motor skills. And as they get older, and when I say, they talk with gestures, I'm talking older babies, like at least 8 months old, at least, where they start kind of shaking their head, they push food away, they turn away from it, right? We've all seen the babies do that. Clapping, a lot of these aren't starting at 8 months, but they raise their arms to be picked. They might look at you but there's a progression here, right? They sort of, in alignment with their ability, they use their body to talk. They reach for things, they show you things, they wave, they point, and you want to be teaching that. Even you can be teaching words at the same time, but as a parent, as a caregiver, your thought is, speech is a later developing skill. It's really complex. I want them to have other motor skills. Gestures. Because especially also if they can do gestures, that's a way of saying, I have a message that I want to send to that person. Here's how I can do it. I can point, right? I can look at mom and I can point. That's way easier than saying, look, right? Look is never a first word, right? Anyway, gestures. So first takeaway from this workshop, develop your baby's gestures. And that website is really helpful. Let me just go to it. First Words Project. Sounds. Okay. We never think of like crying as being important, but crying is something that we look at in an assessment. Do you remember your baby having different cries? Did they make noises? Did they babble? Babies who coo, babies who laugh, they grunt, they cry, all these things. Great. Some babies are very quiet. If you have a very quiet baby, that was probably in some ways like such a relief and so great for you. Oh, he was such a good baby. I hear that a lot. He was such a good baby. That is awesome. Like mom to mom, so cool. Speech therapist to mom, I'm like, bring them in. Probably. If you're seeing anything else, like, we want them making sounds. Meaningful crying, specifically, because I'll reference this later too, is like, you can tell based on their cry what they need. And again, we want a variety of sounds. Including crying. Crying is a developmental skill. It doesn't seem like it because they come out of the womb that way, but like a newborn should cry. But as they, their cries differentiate as early communication, maybe almost before anything else. I don't know if that's exactly true, but crying matters. Sounds. So you should also not worry too much if you're a parent whose baby like cries a lot. That may be something in itself, but we tend to feel really bad as parents if our babies are crying. But like, I mean, not necessarily, right? It's all part of the whole picture. But a baby who cries a lot may be a very expressive baby, may have sensory stuff. I don't know. But at one extreme or the other, it's probably worth looking into. Sounds, cooing, laughing, exploring the voice, especially older babies, they scream. Oh my God. And it's like, stop screaming, but great. We love a screaming baby, right? Singing. And with this, I sort of mean cooing. I sort of mean at that stage where they're like, ah, sometimes in the profession, we call it like vocal play. Ah. They're exploring how to use their voice, right? The way that we talk is not just monotone and flat. We have all of these pitch contours, and babies are learning that. They learn that before they're able to say a word. So we want to see the development of that. And then babbling. Really quickly, babbling starts simple. Bah, bah. It's like one syllable. It's like two sounds together. It's actually really, they start with one sound and then two sounds, but whatever. And becomes more and more complex. So from ba, they go ba ba, or ma to mama, da to da da. And then those get longer. Ba 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 da ba ba, two sounds, and then like three sounds, ba da minu. And in those examples, except for ba da minu, ba 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 ba, there's repeating the same sound, and then there's adding different sounds. So ba da ba, you add the da in there. B is different than ba, is different than bo, boo, all these things. Like that's the start of words, of spoken words, not just verbal skill words. You'll see that's advice. So you'll see that they, around the time a first word appears, I expect you to like be babbling, your baby to be babbling a lot. And so that sometimes when you hear the first word, you're like, did they just say that? I think they just said that. And you sort of hear it a few times before you're like, Some babies it's very clear. A lot of babies it's not, and that's okay. A lot of early language, early talking, early sign usage is them not doing it exactly as we expect it, right? You'll know from, I have it later, we'll talk about exactly what words look like, but you'll know from them using it in a certain context that that's what they mean. So your work as a caregiver, experiment with sounds. Make any sounds that keep their attention, any sounds, because we use all kinds of sounds. We use our voice in all kinds of different ways when we're communicating. So even if they're saying ba, 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 you can say it right back to them. They will love that. And it's teaching their brain, oh, that's ba, ba. That's what it sounds like. Parents sometimes have a pride thing with me that I didn't do baby talk with them. And I always say, like, do baby talk. That's totally great. Like, great. New ways to use your mouth, encouragement. Whenever there's parental attention, there's validation for what they're doing, right? So if you're imitating their silly sounds, that's encouraging them to make sounds. If you're, imitating their babbling, like, great. And that's the beginning of communication too, that I say this and then you say that and we take turns. That's part of it. Repeat, 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 play, make it fun. So imitation, repetition, and play. Imitation, repetition, play are three things that we're going to use throughout their lifespan, but particularly as children, to encourage language development. And those are three skills that therapists use all the time. More green flags. These are not just about sounds. It's sort of sounds, gestures, cognition, all of it. Play peekaboo. Play peekaboo with your kid. Oh my God, play peekaboo with your kid. That, again, is part of communication. That, like, I do something, you wait, and then it's your turn to do something. Like, I say something, you respond as a laugh or whatever. Playing peekaboo is great, is what I'm saying. I don't know if I said that so clearly. Play peekaboo. Hide things, make it fun. Communication is fun. You have new sounds, faces as you're doing peekaboo. Like, peekaboo is a great game. Laughing, smiling, enjoying other people. They want to see you doing that. Do that with other people. Like, great. We want to see them. Laughing and smiling at some point. But again, this is also like, some babies are more serious, but usually you see with language development comes facial expression. Affect is really the word that we're looking for with that. We want different affect as part of their communication development. Looking at named things or people. This will happen before they say their first word. I think, don't quote me on this, feel free to verify, but I think it's around 5 months that they start responding to their name. They turn and look at you, or you say juice, and they're like, right? Like, they can identify things by looking at it. favorite people, grandpa, right? Responding appropriately. Again, appropriate, like what even is appropriate? But it's like if you get mad, they should look a little bit scared or sad, right? If you surprise them, they should act surprised. That's what I mean. That's part of communication. Kids who just like don't have a response to things, worth looking into. There's reasons for that. And then just continual development. Again, I have sort of a catch-all category here. It's like there's lots and lots of milestones. There's lots of domains that they're developing when they're little. We just want to see that they're continuing growth. Ooh. Okay. I feel like I just skipped a bunch. Okay. Because communication is a whole body job, we look at the whole picture. Gross motor skills, feeding skills, sensory skills. Babies need to explore all their senses for strong communication skills. As a speech therapist, I look a lot at words. Parents want me to get their kids talking. Especially in their first year, though, kids like to talk in any way. They've got to have lots of systems online. We have 8 senses. If you talk to an occupational therapist, we have 8, right? So the 5 that we know about, and then interoception and our vestibular and our, dang it, whatever, the other sense. And so that's what we wanted to be developing. So I would say my advice to you as a parent, known issue or not, somebody who's really concerned about their communication development, like look at the whole picture. Get them, let's see if I say it here. I think I say it later. Put them in new situations, develop their tactile. I think that was the other system. Nope, that's not, because that's a 5 sense. Whatever. Develop their whole things. Take them new places or old places. Set up stuff in the house. Let them explore with their eyes, with their bodies, touch their food, even make messes. Sorry, parents. Play. We want to develop all these skills. So professionals like me, we expect at least 1 word at 12 months. Most kids will have more than 1 word by the time 13 months hits, but we want at least 1. We'll get to what a word is, but again, it's not just speaking. People will say, oh, but he's a boy. No, boys should have a word at 1 month too. Yes, if they're learning more than 1 language, yes. Typical development, a baby's first word happens by 12 months. Often in atypical development too, so that can look different. So just, that's what we're looking for. When they turn 1, do they have a word? But what is a word? This is where parents get tripped up. Often their kids are using more words than their parents have given credit for because nobody told you what a word is. And I'm annoyed that can you guys see this? In the way I'm seeing it, I'm blocking some of my own presentation. And if I had known that, I would have just put the star somewhere else. Anyway, hopefully you can see it. A word is used independently, meaning they're not repeating what you're saying. They're not repeating after you. None of the say bye. Bye. That doesn't count. That's great, by the way. That is really great. But if they're not saying it just on their own, bye, it doesn't count as a word. They say it on their own, or they say it with an open-ended prompt like, what do we say? Bye. Okay, that counts. Phonetically consistent. And this goes back to sort of the slide I was talking about earlier where I said it doesn't have to sound like what they're referencing. You just have to know that's what they mean. The word sounds the same way each time. It doesn't have to sound right, just consistent. If you're saying doggy, right? They don't have to say doggy. If they say bobo. My daughter, I swear to God, her first word was bo. I'll talk about why that's valid in a minute, but like, she didn't say doggy, but she knew what a bark was. And anytime she saw a dog, she's or didn't see a dog. She didn't have to see the dog. That was her word. It's meaningful. You can tell they mean something by it. Maybe it's every time they see it, they do it, or they play with a toy, or maybe they sort of ask you for it in that way. You hear them use this a lot. Words do not have to be spoken. Sign language. That means if you've just taught them a few baby signs and they use that, or if they're using a sign language, and then if they're using AAC devices or an SLP suggests that, like, all of those things count as words. Like, they're using words. They're communicating something with words. So as you're looking at your child's development and how many words do they have, you count all of these. If they have the sign for more, but they don't say more, that's fine. They have the word more. So here's some examples of words. There's actual words. Some babies will say mama or dada, whatever. Obviously, those are words. Those count. There's also other categories, approximations. That's what I'm saying. Like, it doesn't have to sound the way an adult says it, and it shouldn't and it won't. They won't say words right the first time. If they say bah, but they mean ball, that counts. Nana counts. And nah for grandma counts. I called my sister Wafa instead of Sarah. Like, that counts. All those are words. Exclamatory sounds, something parents never know. Oh, uh-oh, yay, all of those and more. I gave a few examples. I don't even know if sounds counts as exclamatory, but all of those are words. They say uh-oh, word. Not two words, just one. And then other sounds. And again, like, because these are easier to produce than a word, going back to babbling, ba is easier than ba da ba. So like moo is easier to say than choo-choo, than uh-oh, than da-da, right? So often we'll hear sounds, and SLPs will often work on these simple things, and parents will be like, why are you playing barn animals? I'm like, we're helping them with words. We're helping them develop speaking skills. Siren sounds count. Woo, 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 right? Animal sounds, all of those sounds count. Each one counts as a word. Again, if they're saying it independently and consistently and meaningfully. Names, every name is a word. So if they say mama for everyone, that's one word. But if they have mama, dada, sissy, gaga, whatever, each one of those is a word. And every sign is a word. And I didn't put this on here, but if they're using an AAC device, anytime they touch a word and they mean it, like, that's a word too. But yeah, many babies will sign their first word before their first birthday and well before their first spoken word. I don't know how well before, but it is often easier to, speaking of fine motor skills, like it can be easier to do this than to say mo for some babies, not for all of them. Pink flag. It's not a red flag. So I've actually named this workshop like pink flags and green flags, because I don't think I talk about red flags. A pink flag means for you, you're like, I got to bring this up with someone. Because again, one particular thing doesn't mean it's a problem. It just means it's worth looking into. So if 13 months comes and there's no word, call a speech therapist. Like, I'll just put that there. Doesn't mean they have a disorder. Doesn't mean there's a problem. No. But like, why don't they have their first word? Let's look at that. It may not be a problem. Look, I put there, it may not be a problem. I don't know. Let's look at your kid. Communication is a lot of complex skills. Communication is a complex skill. It's made up of a lot of complex skills. Get them a coach, right? Like, help them with these complex skills. That may be the issue. That stuff, they probably have other stuff going on. Or some kids are, again, like most kids are going to have a first word at age 1. And also, there are kids who are just motivated to do, and they just move and move and move their whole first year, and they're just like not concerned with talking to you. So it may be that we just want to, again, I keep using this word support, but support them in talking. And SLPs also support the parents in cultivating and facilitating communication. So one of the things we look at, and why it's a pink flag and not a red flag. So if they're not using words, and by the way, did you count it correctly? Did you use that slide where there's like 6 categories of like what counts as a word? They probably have a word. There are going to be kids who don't, though. So how are they communicating? How difficult is it for them to communicate? How stressful is it on you when your child is communicating? Are they throwing tantrums? Are they just grabbing stuff? That's so hard. There's a lot on the slide. The takeaway is, if communication is a one-way street, if you're doing the anticipating, if you're get it assessed. How do you do that? Talk to your pediatrician or talk to an early intervention agency. Easter Seals is one that does it commonly all over the country, but there's others too. Okay, so looking at sounds, again, the categories we've talked about. Are they babbling? Are they cooing? Are they laughing? Are they imitating you? Are they understanding what you're saying to them? That's technically not in the sound category, but whatever. Are they making sound effects? Do they have meaningful cries? Do they grunt? Like, is it, anyway, how are their sounds? Facial expressions, right? Do they just have this one like serious face, like serious baby face? How did I spell appropriately? That is so off. That's hilarious. Are they made appropriately? Mad when mad? That's funny. Do they look mad when they get mad? They look scared when you get mad, whatever. Scared, that kind of thing. Do they point? Do they take you by your hand, shake their head? Are they using gestures, or are they just sort of pulling you to everything and tantruming when you don't understand? That's a big one. Do they use words? Do they understand words? How difficult is it to talk with them? On this note, so I would just look at all of these, and if you're just like, oh, they don't make facial expressions and they don't really imitate and they're not really pointing, okay, definitely assess. If it's just that they don't have words but they're doing these other things, I always think you should just assess because it doesn't hurt. But here's one thing that's true about moms and babies, and I'm saying moms, but I mean anybody who's home with them all the time. It could be grandma, it could be a nanny, it could be a teacher, whatever. Not that teachers would be home with them, but whoever is like kind of with them the most. Like kids know that we know what they want and that we understand them without having to talk. And so sometimes like an issue is an issue, but what I just want to say is like they can be less motivated to talk to certain people because especially moms, like they know they don't got to explain everything to you. You already know. You can read their mind. So I would just, whoever that primary person is, and usually it's like two, you're just like a mom and a teacher, like a mom and a nanny or something. Like look at the communication with non-caregivers, people who do not interact with this child all the time. How easy is it for them to understand your child? How easy, how is communication? If the primary caregiver is struggling to communicate, I just say struggles. Let me say it this way. If the primary caregiver is struggling to understand, that's an assessment thing. If the primary caregiver feels like, I understand her, but other people don't, maybe it's worth an assessment. But we at least want clear gesture use. We do want a word. And I would just look at a whole picture thing, a whole community thing. Who cannot understand this kid? How hard is it? How frustrated is the child? How frustrated are you? How much of a burden is it on you? All of that. Okay. That was a lot of information. Just to recap. Very, very simply, in the most zoomed out perspective kind of way, the first year brings us to our first word. It ends in one word. Usually more. One word is I think like 5 words. But okay, we want a word. It's not all about words. Look at the gestures they're using and understanding. As understanding is always a part of this. It's just easier to gauge what they're using and doing. Gestures, facial expressions, attempts to communicate, their understanding, their interaction with all kinds of people. Like I said, their primary caregivers, new people, whatever. Their imitation skills, and then just general growth and learning. Often, not always, often you see a delay in one area, you see it in more than one area. And if you see growth in all the areas or all but one, there may not be an issue. Usually these things happen, with their friends. Their friends being just like the other like domains of development. The start thing I have down here, Babel Bootcamp for babies with genetic syndrome. So Babel Bootcamp is a research project out of, sorry if I get this wrong, but I want to say it's Arizona State. It's definitely Arizona, University in Arizona. I want to say it's ASU. Anyway, for babies with genetic syndrome. So 2 things are true here. One, as parents, we get very nervous about our kids and like, how can we help them in this world? Particularly kids with a genetic syndrome where you're like, they won't talk until blah, blah, blah. Or we have all this research that talks about their challenges. And I just want to say like early intervention matters. That's the second thing I'm going to say is like, even babies with genetic syndromes, right? Like they're predisposed to difficulty with communication, for example. Intervention, meaning getting seen by a speech language pathologist, working with a speech language pathologist, can put their communication on track, or at least get it, somewhere. Again, there are how do I even say this? There are real barriers to communication with some people's biology and physiology. But so I just want to say, anyway, Babel Bootcamp is a real thing for a particular genetic syndrome that I can't name right now. But if your baby, if you know that your baby is going to have communication challenges, great. Definitely call a speech therapist. If you didn't know that and it seems like your child is struggling, Also call a speech therapist. There's so much we can do in the first 3 years. Like, you would be amazed. Get people on your side. Big picture. I'm going to start at the last bullet. Don't panic if your child doesn't have a first word. Just call in the SLPs. I like how I put it in plural, like we're an army that's going to show up. You can just call one. That's fine. Year one is about getting all systems online. We always focus on one word, which is why I just talked about a word, but I'm talking about the whole picture, right? You want all of their systems. Expose your child to new environments, tastes, textures, people, sounds, faces, movement, challenges, fun, sights, music, games, everything. You just like, your child is new to planet Earth. They've never been on planet Earth before. Teach them what it's like, to be here. Like, to put it briefly. Something that seems like it wouldn't directly relate to communication is absolutely helping them to communicate, because part of communication is just like the thinking skills that we have, the concepts we have in our brain. I may tell the story again at another point, but I had a professor in school who said, she was with some family friends. They were Colombian, and maybe it was World Cup time. And so they, like, in the minds of the adults, soccer was on the mind. But these kids were swimmers. One kid in particular was a swimmer. And so in swim lessons, they'd been taught to, like, kick in the pool. When all the family's together, the kids are around, there's soccer ball around, World Cup is on, and they're like, kick. They're going for the ball, right? They're all playing soccer in the room, kick. And the kid, like, gets down on the floor, kind of confused, like on their belly, and starts kicking their legs like they're in swim lessons. It's like, why did they do that? Because in their mind, the concept that they had for kick was to kick in the water, not kick a soccer ball. We use the same word for that, but that's two different concepts, right? Open. This happens a lot with kids. Open a door is different from opening a box, from open your mouth. So what I'm saying is exposing them to all different concepts and talking about those things as you're doing it is helping them. It's helping them. It's all part of communication. Thank you. And look out for part 2. Which maybe you don't need to look out for it. Maybe it's already up by now. I don't know how far in the future you are. But thank you. If you have questions, reach out to me or below. I did not include any contact information here. That's fine. Probably check the description or something. But I'm at Connection First, connectionfirsttherapy.com. Google me. I don't know. It's fine. It's 2024. You'll find a way to find me. Or another speech therapist. Again, it doesn't have to be me. Thank you. We'll see you soon.